Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the question mark. The question mark is, once again, a pretty basic and straightforward piece of punctuation in most instances, I would say. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It marks a sentence as being a question. Typically, questions in English are fairly simple and straightforward to identify anyway. They begin with question words, usually. Things like when, how, why, things like this. And so, usually from the context of a sentence, you can make a reasonable guess that something is a question, even without a question mark at the end. That being said, this is the main use of the question mark as a piece of punctuation. It goes at the end of a question. And in fact, there are times in which question words are not at the beginning of questions, but at the beginning of statements. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have connected them with another, for instance. That's a statement that starts with when, which is normally a question word. And so, I mean, again, from context, we can infer that that is not a question, and therefore the punctuation is not super crucial, but nonetheless, this is a useful tool for marking that something is a question versus a statement. Now, so one thing with question marks in English is that, as with exclamation marks, they only come at the end of sentences, whereas in a language like Spanish, they begin with an upside-down question mark at the beginning of the sentence to signal that this is a question. And so we know that from the beginning of the sentence, not just from the end. And I think that's a really, really useful innovation that we don't have in English, and in many other languages we don't do that. But that is the way that it works in English, is we just have question marks at the end. The other thing that question marks can do is to signal uncertainty. And so what I mean by this is sometimes a question mark will be put at the end, or even in some cases in the middle of a statement, to indicate that it is unsure, that the author or the speaker is uncertain about this. So sometimes this will actually transition a statement into a question. Because of the way that grammar works in English, we can have a statement that functions as a question if there is an implied question word. So we could have a sentence like, I suppose it's time. That's a statement. Grammatically, it's a statement, but put a question mark on the end of it, you inflect it properly with the tone going up at the end, which is how we inflect questions in English, and suddenly it becomes, is it time, implicitly. The language itself may still be, I suppose it's time, but if it's set up as a question, then the intended meaning, the intended focus, or the intended purpose of that statement is then to say, is it time? It is to ask that question. So this is one thing that in written text question marks can do, is they can transition statements to questions, or again, they can signal uncertainty about a statement. I am saying this thing, but I'm unclear whether or not it's true. And we can actually also see this sometimes in the middle of sentences. If, for instance, you are doing what we might call editorial commentary on something. Like if you are saying something and you are questioning whether a particular word is the right word to describe something, Sometimes people will, in parentheses, put a question mark in order to indicate that they are in some way uncertain about whether or not the previous word is correct. So this is another, I think, fairly modern use of the question mark. I don't think this is a very traditional one. I think this is something that has developed in the contemporary period as a way of indicating that uncertainty. So those are the only real additional sort of potential uses of the question mark. For the most part, again, it's a fairly simple, straightforward, and self-explanatory piece of punctuation in which it comes at the end of a question.